everyone, we're gonna go over linear inequalities now. You should have received an interactive notebook for solving equations. The skills are very similar, except for some key differences. So before we start that, let's just quickly go over inverse operations one more time. The inverse of addition is subtraction, and what that means, and the inverse of subtraction is addition. So what that means is, if you have something like x plus 3 equals 10, we see that there's some addition going on. To isolate the x, what we have to do is subtract by 3. And in equations, you always have balance. So if you subtract by 3 on one side, you have to subtract by 3 on the other. So we have x equals 7. In the same way, if you have something like x minus 5 equals 20, we see subtraction going on. So what we would have to do is add 5 to cancel that out. And again, we have to do it on both sides to keep balance. And that is how we get x equals 25. So that's the inverse addition and subtraction. Then when it comes to multiplication and division, something very similar happens. One key misconception is realizing that when you have something like 3x equals 30, when you have a number and a letter together like this, it means multiplication is going on. So to undo the multiplication, we now have to divide by 3. And then you would divide by 3 on the other side as well to keep balance. So we have x equals 10. Now, the next part is really important, especially for today's lesson. Division is undone by multiplication. So if you have something like x divided by 5 equals 20. This whole idea of a fraction means that division is going on. So to undo this fraction, we have to multiply by the denominator, in this case 5. So we multiply here by 5, and to keep balance, we have to multiply the other side by 5 also. The only purpose of multiplying this left side by 5 is to cancel out the denominator. You don't actually have to go in the calculator and multiply 5 by 5. You just have to understand that on the left side, it's just being canceled out. So that would leave the x alone. Now on the right side, you do put it in the calculator and you do 20 times 5, which gives us 100. So those are the inverse operations for multiplication and division. So now before we go into a sample question, I mentioned that there was one key difference between solving equations and solving inequalities. When you solve inequalities and you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to flip the sign. So for example here, or like rather here, this might be a better example. We are dividing by -1, right? So since we are dividing by -1 to get the x alone, you have to flip the sign over, okay? So it started out as a less than or equal to. Since you divided by a negative, you have to do greater than or equal to. All right, so let's do a very quick sample regions question. To solve this inequality, let me just draw a yellow line right in the middle. That might be a little hard to show. So let me do a purple line right in the middle. When we say solve, we want to have the y or whatever variable that they're using by itself. I always like to move the variable to the left side, but before we do that, we're gonna do some distribution. Since we see a parentheses, that's gonna be our first step, to distribute the 5 to the 2 and the 5 to the -y. When we distribute, we are multiplying. And what that means is 5 times 2 gives us 10. And then 5 times -y, keep in mind there's like an invisible -1 here. So what that means is 5 times -1y equals -5y. The right side doesn't have any parentheses, so we don't need to distribute anything on that side. So let's bring down our inequality symbol and our whole right side. Okay, so now like we see, we have y's on both sides, and we don't like that. I'm actually going to move everything that's not a y to the right, and I'm gonna move all the y's to the left. So I'm going to start with moving this 10 out of here. So since it is, since it is a positive 10, I am going to do minus 10 to cancel it. And if you do minus 10 on this side, you also have to do minus 10 on this side. So I'm going to do minus 10 under the negative 8 because they are like terms. I wouldn't put it under the negative 11y because this one has a y. So what I get out of that is negative 5y greater than negative 11y, and then negative 8 minus 10 gives us negative 18. Okay, so now my inequality looks a little smaller, which means we're making some progress. Now that I moved everything that doesn't have a y out of here, I'm gonna move all my y's to the left, meaning this negative 11y. To cancel this out of here, I am going to add 11y, that would cancel it, and I'm going to add 11y on this side as well. What that gives me is, and 6y greater than negative 18. So I'm almost there, right? Now I just have to cancel out this 6y. To cancel out this 6 from the y. To cancel out this 6, I just have to divide by 6, and that would cancel it, but whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So we have y is greater than negative 3. And that would be my answer. Now, notice that I didn't divide by a negative 6, right? I didn't have to. This wasn't a negative 6. That's why I didn't flip this sign. If this would have been a negative 6, then I would have to flip the sign. Go ahead and pause, rewind this video, take any notes, and then get started on your practice.